tonight the clear way forward for the pandemic response in this country, the push to reunite the nation and the absolutely disgusting political and scaremongering resistance to that push from some state leaders. So much hypocrisy, so much humble pie and so much division in the way our state premiers have been dealing with this. Wait till I show you what they've been saying in Queensland and Western Australia. But let's start in Victoria, where I told you yesterday that it was a very, very significant day because yesterday it became clear that Daniel Andrews was conceding he could not get back to COVID zero. Today he was even more explicit and the rest of the media picked up on this turning point.
When we get advice, we follow it, and the data and the evidence and the experts are very clear with us. We will not see these case numbers go down. They are going to go up. The question is, by how many and how fast?
Hello, hello. He finally recognised reality. And so Victoria's Chief Health Officer outlined what is effectively a new plan today.
Today's number is not a great number. We know that. It shows us why we need to continue our very substantial efforts to slow the spread of the virus, to put a cap on the numbers that we might get to until enough of us are vaccinated.
Yeah, this is Victoria now copying, replicating what's happening in New South Wales. This is Daniel Andrews, as I said last night, following the Gladys Berejiklian strategy, a plan he was slamming just days ago. Victoria will now tie the lifting of restrictions and the eventual lifting of lockdowns to vaccination rates, not COVID zero. The Premier's ridiculous and cruel closure of playgrounds is ending straight away. That'll stop tomorrow. But cop this, there'll be QR codes at the playgrounds and only one parent at a time. Seriously, these people. Anyway, Andrews is promising a few extra freedoms on September the 23rd. That's when he reckons his state will get the 70% of eligible people having their first jab. Now that, by the way, also means the Victorian 7-day lockdown will now go for at least 50 days. But it also means that, like New South Wales, it's all about jabbing your way to freedom.
These will be the settings that we all have to live with for a period of time until we reach not just first dose vaccination thresholds, but second dose vaccination thresholds as outlined in the National Cabinet Plan, the 70% 2-dose and 80% 2-dose.
How about that? I just can't get over it, really. Here he is, Daniel Andrews, just talking exactly like Gladys Berejiklian now. He was lecturing her a fortnight ago. How humiliating for him. That is one about face today, but there's another one. And what about this one? I showed you the other day how the Premier, the Victorian Premier, was claiming there was a shortage of vaccines in his state.
There's millions of Victorians who want to get vaccinated like yesterday, and the only limiting factor at the moment is how much we have. If extra supply turns up, we don't want it going, there's been some special consideration for Sydney, fair enough, but now it's got to be equal.
Well, that was then, and we pointed out at the time it was nonsense because the country has AstraZeneca to burn. And today, Andrews was urging people to get the jab and he was stressing that he had stacks of supplies.
There is good, effective, safe vaccine available right now. We've always pushed this because it's always been true. It is a safe and effective product and it is on the shelves available in the warehouse right now.
OK, so that's another big turnaround from Daniel Andrews this week. But credit where it's due. Daniel Andrews is now moving in the right direction. It is the only direction, by the way. And the crucial question is the speed at which you move, the steps along the way to COVID normal. And on that front, Gladys Berejiklian stepped on the gas today. She said New South Wales will change dramatically in mid-October. That's when the state will hit 70% full vaccination, and that's when many liberties will return, but only for the vaccinated.
Look, at 70%, if you are double vaccinated, expect to do everything that you miss doing, whether it's having a meal at your favourite cafe or restaurant, whether it's attending a public event, whether it's having a drink. I mean, if you're fully vaccinated and the state has hit its 70% double dose target, please expect to do all those things we've been missing for too long.
Plenty more details to come, but Gladys Berejiklian is talking about international travel and the end of quarantine requirements for the vaccinated once New South Wales hits 80% as soon as November. So for now, the 8.5 million people in New South Wales are about 6 weeks away from the decent relaxation of lockdown rules and a major reopening for businesses under COVID normal plans. Then, after that, the next big challenge will be opening up the nation, opening up our state borders and starting to behave as one country again rather than 6 nation states. Berejiklian says the other leaders are going to have to wake up.
I believe that good people stand up and work together for the betterment of the public, and I have faith that every state leader and chief minister will come to that conclusion. The only difference is they haven't been confronted with Delta. They still think you can live in a fantasy zero COVID land, which you can't. And what is best for our citizens is to accept that reality, deal with it, and get us through this difficult time.
OK, so all that makes sense. And on the front page of the Australian newspaper today, the federal government weighed in with Attorney General Michaelia Cash, putting pressure on the states to reconsider their hard borders, pointing out that the legal basis for shutting borders will weaken when vaccination rates hit 70 and 80%. Now, that's just an obvious and important point. We are one country after all, but the reaction in the West was extraordinary.
Look, I don't know why the federal government's doing this. Why are they doing this? What's gotten into them? We had a High Court challenge last year and we won easily against Clive Palmer and the Liberal Party. If they want to bring on round 2, let them. West Australians don't want me to bring it down now, to give in to this sort of crazy bullying by the federal government and infect our population.
Well, the federal government says today, Michaelia Cash says the government's not taking WA to the courts, but that slightly manic and aggressive response from Mark McGowan overlooks some crucial points, and that is that Western Australia had good reason, according to the High Court, to shut its border for health reasons last year. But a lot has changed. There was no vaccine last year, for starters. And the argument is that with 70 or 80% of all Australians, including sandgropers, vaccinated in the future, the court might find that closing borders is no longer reasonable. The federal government isn't talking about opening borders right now anyway, but rather when those vaccination targets are met. But have a listen to the way Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk railed against the opening of state borders, and she created unnecessary and irresponsible alarm about children.
You open up this state and you let the virus in here, and every child under 12 is vulnerable. Every single child, if anyone has any children under 12 to 0, is vulnerable because they are the unvaccinated, Mr. Speaker.
This is disgusting politicking. You all know, because we constantly talk to the experts about this stuff on this program, that no one should be frightening children or their parents when it comes to COVID-19, which is blessedly benign for children. Surely that's the one saving grace of this pandemic, is the fact that it's not a major threat to our kids. Here's a couple of recent expert summaries.
I've been a paediatrician, a children's doctor for over 30 years. I've done research on vaccination for over 30 years. If I thought children needed to be vaccinated, I'd be jumping on the roof and waving my arms. What we have to put into perspective is that the people who die from this are those with chronic medical conditions and people who are elderly. And children get a cold, or they may get a sniffle. And they may well pass it on. And you need to get a ring of steel around the kids so that the older at-risk people are vaccinated. Then later, when we've got time, we can vaccinate children when we've got supply.
Yes, they might get it and they might spread it to others, but the consequences of them are very low, even if they're not vaccinated. And providing we then have vaccinated the adults they come in contact with, particularly their grandparents, but also their teachers and parents, that will make a huge difference to making this overall no worse than a lot of other viruses we don't have vaccines for and circulate particularly every winter.
Yep, that is the reassuring medical reality from the experts. Yet the Queensland Premier seeks to create alarm in the community about children in order to fuel her political fight with Canberra. That is low-grade pandemic politics. But there's always someone who can go a little lower, isn't there? In this case, it was her deputy.
We are not here in Queensland in a cave. The LNP and the Prime Minister for Sydney might want us to open our borders and let the virus in. He might want us to deliberately infect Queenslanders, our young people who can't have a vaccine.
Yeah, the Deputy Premier of Queensland is accusing his national government of wanting to infect Queensland kids, of wanting Queenslanders to get the coronavirus and get sick. Someone is getting sick, all right. Very sick indeed. These politicians who have denied reality for too long are now having to play catch up quickly, and they ought to be a lot smarter and more honourable than all of that. National Cabinet should be a lot of fun with this lot dealing with each other on Friday.